Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at something pretty wild, like straight out of science fiction. We're talking about astronaut Sunita Williams. She's stuck on the International Space Station.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, her ride home, Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. It's got some technical difficulties, we'll say, so we're going to take a look at what's going on up there.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, we've got some news articles to pull from and some background info on Williams from NASA.
Okay.
So let's dive in.
Right.
First, who IS Sunita Williams? Like, what's her deal?
Well, she's a pretty incredible astronaut, that's for sure. NASA picked her way back in 1998.
Wow.
And since then, she's been on 2 long-duration missions,
Okay.
totaling a whopping 322 days in space.
322 days.
Yeah, and that's before this unplanned little extension, haha.
Jeez. So almost a full year in space already.
Exactly. Which means she's no stranger to the demands of living up there. I mean, long-duration spaceflight poses some serious physical and psychological challenges.
I bet.
You're dealing with microgravity, radiation exposure, isolation, not to mention the constant awareness of the risks involved.
Right.
But Suni Williams, she hasn't just faced those challenges, she's thrived in that environment.
And before this mission even started, she already had over 50 hours of spacewalk time under her belt.
50 hours? That's wild. A typical spacewalk is like 6 to 8. Think about the pressure and the environment she's working at. 50 hours shows incredible skill. Really remarkable composure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And problem-solving abilities, right? I mean, talk about a high-pressure situation.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the physical and mental resilience that takes. Qualities that are undoubtedly being tested now with this whole Starliner situation.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. This veteran astronaut used to these super long missions. Now she's facing this extended stay on what should have been a short trip.
Yeah, haha. Talk about bad timing.
So let's get into that, the whole Boeing Starliner situation. What exactly went wrong?
Well, so the Starliner was supposed to be like this crew transportation system for the ISS. This was actually its very first crewed mission. Williams and astronaut Butch Wilmore, they launched back in June 2024.
Oh, wow. So this has been going on a while.
Yeah, they were only supposed to be up there for 8 days.
8 days. That's like a vacation compared to her other missions.
Uh-huh, right. But during their time on the ISS, the Starliner ran into some pretty serious problems, like helium leaks in the propulsion system. And then some of the thrusters started malfunctioning.
Okay, hold on. Helium leaks and thruster malfunctions. For those of us who aren't rocket scientists, what does that actually mean? Like, how bad is it?
So basically, the helium pressurizes the Starliner's fuel tanks, which
Okay.
obviously, is essential for those thrusters to work correctly.
Right.
But these leaks, they basically messed up the spacecraft's ability to maneuver and control its descent back to Earth.
Oh, no.
And if you don't have reliable thrusters, well, you could be looking at a really dangerous reentry.
So they're stuck up there until they can figure out how to fix those thrusters.
Yeah, NASA's working on it, but it's not a quick fix. They're now saying the return date is going to be sometime in spring 2025.
Spring 2025. Wow. So what's the plan? How are they going to get them back?
Well, get this. They're planning on using a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft.
Well, wait. SpaceX, isn't that Boeing's competitor?
Haha, it is. It's pretty wild, right? This situation really shows how collaborative space exploration is. Like in a situation like this, they're putting the astronaut's safety above everything else.
Definitely. Makes sense. So while engineers are down here trying to solve this whole Starliner mess, Williams and Wilmore are just stuck 250 miles above Earth, their lives on hold.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Big time.
And it makes you wonder, what kind of psychological impact this kind of situation has.
Yeah, dealing with that kind of unexpected extension, the disruption to their lives, like not knowing when they'll actually get to come home, it must be really hard.
Oh, definitely. It's a testament to their training and their mental strength, for sure.
I mean, we talked about how Suni Williams has already done these long-duration flights,
Right.
but still, it's one thing to go up knowing how long you'll be there. It's another to have it suddenly extended with no end in sight.
Exactly. You can plan and prepare for a set amount of time, but this kind of uncertainty, that adds a whole new level of complexity. It's going to be really disorienting. Emotionally, it's probably really tough.
I can't imagine. I'd be freaking out. And on top of that, there's the whole thing with their ride home not working.
Right. It's got to be a constant source of anxiety. Like, you're up there knowing your vehicle is broken.
Definitely adds to the pressure. But even with all that going on, Sunita Williams is still working, still doing research and stuff up there. And she even did a spacewalk with astronaut Nick Hague recently.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's another one planned with Butch Wilmore. Pretty incredible considering everything.
It is. And those spacewalks, they're not just like routine maintenance or anything. They're super important for the whole ISS operation.
Ah,
Yeah, they're doing repairs, upgrading equipment, collecting samples, all kinds of complicated stuff.
wow. Okay, so tell me, how do you even prepare for something like that? I mean, working in space, outside the station, it just seems so, I don't know, demanding.
Yeah, it is. They go through rigorous training here on Earth. They actually spend hours in these simulated microgravity environments, practicing underwater to get used to the whole weightlessness thing.
Wow, that's intense.
It is. And it's not just about being physically strong. Mentally, you have to be prepared for anything.
I bet. What kind of mental qualities are important for an astronaut, especially in a situation like this?
You got to be adaptable, for sure, and resourceful, able to think on your feet and solve problems in real time, and comfortable with risk. I mean, it's a risky job, period. You have to be okay with that.
So being an astronaut isn't just about being a good pilot or engineer, it's about having this incredible mental resilience, too.
Exactly. You got to be able to handle the unexpected. Things are constantly changing up there.
And Sunita Williams is clearly demonstrating that she's got that. She's not just surviving up there, she's thriving.
Okay, so before we get into what she's been working on and, like, her amazing spacewalk record, I want to talk about the bigger picture. What does this whole Starliner situation tell us about where space travel is headed? Especially with all this talk about going to Mars.
It definitely shows that we need backup systems, especially for missions that are going to last a long time. You can't just, like, send a quick rescue if something goes wrong on Mars.
No kidding.
Yeah, if one system fails, you need a plan B and C and D. Got to make sure the crew is safe. Can you imagine being millions of miles from Earth on a mission to Mars and something critical breaks?
Oh, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, and it just really emphasizes how important testing is. And quality control. Everything has to be as reliable as possible. We're talking about people's lives here.
True. So space travel's exciting, yeah. And there's so much potential, but it's still risky.
Oh, absolutely.
And the further we push into space, the more careful we have to be. Yeah, things have to be perfect, or as close to perfect as we can get them. There's not a lot of room for error.
And when you think about the psychological aspect, the mental strain of those longer missions, like a trip to Mars, it's got to be even more intense.
Oh, for sure.
Mm.
I mean, isolation and confinement, that's huge. Imagine being stuck in a tiny spaceship with the same people for years, millions of miles from Earth, from everything familiar.
I can't even imagine. Sounds claustrophobic.
Yeah, and then there's the communication delay.
Yeah.
The further you get from Earth, the longer it takes for signals to travel back and forth. Imagine trying to have a conversation with a 20-minute delay each way.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be frustrating.
It would drive you crazy. And it
Right.
makes it hard to stay connected to people back home. Feeling isolated like that, it can really wear on you.
Yeah, so it's not just about getting to Mars physically.
Right.
It's about being mentally and emotionally prepared to be that far away for that long.
Exactly. We need to figure out how to deal with those challenges.
Right.
Make the environments in the spacecraft more stimulating, help them deal with the isolation. They're going to need a lot of support.
Yeah, it sounds like we can learn a lot from what Sunita Williams is going through right now.
Definitely. It's giving us a lot of insight into what it takes to do these long missions, reminding us that it's not just about technology.
True.
It's about the astronauts, too. Their resilience, their adaptability. If they're not okay, the mission won't be successful.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot here, but let's get back to Sunita Williams. Despite this crazy situation, she's still out there working, breaking records with her spacewalks. Tell me about that. What's she accomplished up there, and what does it tell us about her?
Okay, so she just surpassed Peggy Whitson's record for the total spacewalking time by a woman. 62 hours outside the station.
Wow, she broke a record while stranded in space. That's pretty amazing.
It is. I mean, talk about dedication, professionalism. It shows how much she cares about the mission, even when things are this tough.
It's inspiring, honestly, to see her making the most of this bad situation, breaking boundaries, achieving these incredible things when it would be so easy to just, give up.
It's a reminder that we're capable of so much more than we think we are.
Absolutely. And that we can find a way to do amazing things even when things go wrong.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll dive deeper into Sunita Williams' spacewalks and all the incredible work she's doing up on the ISS. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive on astronaut Sunita Williams' an unplanned extended stay on the ISS. Before the break, we were talking about those record-breaking spacewalks and her amazing resilience. So let's get into the details. What was she actually doing out there?
Right, so these spacewalks were all about keeping the station running and making sure they can still do all that important science stuff.
Okay.
One of the walks was focused on upgrading the power systems.
Oh, wow, the power systems.
Yeah, Williams and Nick Hague, they were installing adapter plates and new cabling.
What for? It was to support these newer, more efficient batteries, lithium-ion batteries. They were replacing the old nickel-hydrogen ones.
Interesting. So, like a major power upgrade.
Yeah, think of it like this. The space station needs a reliable power supply for, well, pretty much everything. Life support, experiments, the whole shebang.
Okay, that makes sense. So it wasn't just some routine maintenance thing. They were making sure the ISS stays powered up.
Exactly. Now, the second spacewalk was focused on something different, but just as important.
Oh, yeah.
It was all about thermal control.
Thermal control, what's that?
So the space station generates a lot of heat, right, from all the equipment, the experiments. And they have this really complex system of radiators to get rid of all that heat.
Okay, makes sense.
So Williams and Wilmore were installing this flow control valve and some ammonia jumper cables.
Hold on. Ammonia jumper cables? What in the world are those?
Yeah, it sounds a little strange. Basically, imagine these pipes that run throughout the station carrying ammonia. It's used as a coolant, super efficient. And these jumper cables, they're like bypass lines.
Bypass lines.
Yeah, it allows the engineers down here on Earth to, like, redirect the flow of ammonia, kind of like adjusting the thermostat, but way more complicated.
So they can make sure the station stays at the right temperature, even from Earth.
Yep, it's super important. Got to keep the crew comfortable and make sure the equipment doesn't overheat.
Wow, it's like a giant space puzzle, and Sunita Williams is out there making sure all the pieces fit.
That's a great way to put it.
And all this while she's dealing with this crazy, unplanned extension of her mission. The stress of that must be unbelievable. It's amazing how she can still do these complicated tasks.
Right. It really shows how much training they go through and how Sunita Williams can handle anything that comes her way.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked about the psychological challenges of space travel, and I want to dive a little deeper into that, with Sunita Williams being up there longer than expected. Yeah.
Do you think this unplanned extension on top of all her experience can teach us more about how space affects people's minds? Like, long term.
Yeah.
Especially if we're thinking about sending people to Mars someday.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's like this unexpected experiment in human resilience. We already know a bit about the short-term effects, like adjusting to microgravity, the isolation, how it messes with your sleep.
Yeah.
But this situation, it gives us a chance to see how those things might add up over time.
So what are researchers looking at specifically? Like, what are the big questions about how space affects the mind?
Well, one big one is cognitive function. How well your brain works, basically. We know that microgravity and radiation can mess with the brain a bit, but we don't really know how that plays out over a really long time.
I see.
So they might look at reaction time, memory, problem-solving skills, even creativity.
That's so interesting. We're still figuring out how the human body reacts to space. It's wild. It is. And beyond how well your brain works, there's also the whole mental well-being aspect. The isolation, being away from loved ones, the constant risk. All that can lead to stress, anxiety, could even trigger depression.
Wow. It must take a toll.
It can. So they're also interested in how Williams and Wilmore are coping. What are they doing to stay mentally healthy up there? And how can we support them from down here?
Makes you realize that pushing the limits of space travel is important.
Right.
But taking care of the people who are actually going out there, that's crucial too.
Yeah, I got to find that balance. The further we go, the longer the missions, the more important that balance becomes.
Okay, so we've talked about the psychological side of things, but I want to circle back to the technical issues with the Starliner.
Okay.
What do you think might have gone wrong to cause those leaks and thruster problems? And, what can we learn from this whole mess?
Yeah, it's definitely raised some questions about how reliable these spacecraft are, especially the ones being built by these commercial companies. Yeah. The helium leaks, they could be from a problem with the fuel tanks. Or maybe the pipes that carry the helium.
I see.
Could be a design flaw. Maybe something went wrong during manufacturing. Or even the materials they used. Who knows?
So it's not enough to just fix it.
Right.
We have to figure out why it broke in the first place.
Exactly. Got to prevent it from happening again. That's why the investigation is so important. They're looking at every single part of the Starliner, analyzing all the data, doing tons of tests.
And it's a big deal for NASA's Commercial Crew program, right? I mean, this was supposed to be one of the main ways to get astronauts to and from the ISS.
Yeah, it's definitely a setback. It shows how tough it is to build these spacecraft, especially when you're trying out new technologies.
Reminds us that space travel is still in its early stages, really.
It is.
There are going to be bumps in the road, risks we have to take, and hopefully we learn from our mistakes.
Absolutely.
Eh.
It's unfortunate what happened, but I guarantee you they're going to improve the design, the testing, the way they do things. It'll make things safer in the future.
So basically, we learn from this, and it helps us get even better at space exploration.
That's the idea. And Sunita Williams, even though she's up there because of this mess, she's helping us learn.
True.
Her experience is providing valuable data, things we wouldn't get otherwise.
Okay, we're going to take another quick break. When we get back, we'll talk about what this whole thing means for the future of space travel and how NASA is working with companies like SpaceX and Boeing. Plus, we'll talk more about Sunita Williams and her legacy as a true pioneer in space. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the show. We've been talking about astronaut Sunita Williams' unexpected extended stay on the ISS, all because of those problems with Boeing's Starliner. Before the break, we were discussing the investigations into what caused those issues and, thinking about how we can make space travel safer in the future. But I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the human side of things. Williams and Wilmore are living in this really unique and challenging environment up there.
It is a pretty incredible situation, isn't it? It is, and it makes me wonder, what can we learn from their experience, especially about the long-term psychological effects of space travel? We talk about going to Mars someday, and those missions could last years.
Right. This situation is giving us a peek into what those longer missions might be like. It's not just about planning for a set amount of time.
Yeah.
Things can change.
Yeah.
You have to be ready for anything. And that takes a certain kind of person.
What do you mean? Like, what makes an astronaut able to handle that kind of pressure?
Well, they got to be adaptable, obviously. Resilient, too.
No.
Emotionally intelligent.
Emotionally intelligent. So it's not just about being a good pilot or scientist.
Right. They have to be able to manage stress, stay positive when things go wrong, keep up morale, not just for themselves, but for the whole crew.
It's like we're not just looking for the best and brightest anymore. We need the most well-rounded people we can find.
Exactly. The human element is becoming more and more important the further we push into space. We can have the best technology in the world, but if the crew isn't mentally prepared, the mission could fail.
And that brings us back to Sunita Williams.
Right.
Stuck up there with a broken spacecraft, and she's still going strong. Working hard, even setting records with those spacewalks. It's pretty amazing, honestly.
It is. She's turning this whole mess into something positive.
Yeah, she's not letting it get her down. Do you think her experience shows us something about how adaptable humans can be?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, she's dealing with a lot. And she's finding ways to stay productive, to make the most of a bad situation. And I think that says a lot about the human spirit.
It does. It's inspiring. It shows that even when things go wrong, even when we're faced with the unknown, we can find ways to overcome challenges.
Absolutely. And keep striving for our goals.
Sunita Williams' story is about so much more than a broken spacecraft. It's about pushing the boundaries of human exploration, about never giving up.
It really is. It's a reminder of what we're capable of when we set our minds to something, of how far we can go.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into this incredible story. We've covered a lot today.
We have?
From the technical issues with the Starliner to the psychological challenges of long-duration spaceflight, and of course the amazing resilience of Sunita Williams. It's been a fascinating journey.
I agree.
And we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring.